I know it's early, but a couple of big superstar contracts and big acquisitions aren't exactly paying off right now. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If I wasn't, how could I have this lower third? Or you can call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for over a decade now, and this is my fifth season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. You can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. Please subscribe to the YouTube channels. We are slowly but steadily making it to our goal of 1 billion subscribers. And by the way, this episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make cooking at home fun, easy, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/MLB60 and use code MLB60 for 60% off, free shipping. And subscribe to us on YouTube. I mentioned that already. Oh, by the way, we're doing a crossover. Guess who's sitting right over there?
It's me. Got my quality company man shirt on today.
Oh,
repping the Locked On. Yeah,
I forgot to wear my swag.
Yeah, where's the branding? Millard Thomas, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, of course. Please follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account. Look up the show account, Locked On Diamondbacks. Just type it in the little search bar on both Twitter and Instagram. And please, just like Sully Baseball, we are nowhere near 1 billion subscribers, but we're trying to hit 500. So please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
We're recording this on the 17th of April. Some of the games are still going on. The Red Sox game on Patriots Day, of course, starts at 8 in the morning here in California, 11 o'clock.
So early.
I love it. It's one of those great traditions. I love the individual traditions we have. It's always been that way where the Red Sox play the early game to allow people to also support the marathon. Obviously, we know what happened 10 years ago, the tragedy that happened. And it was, I just remember doing the old Sully Baseball show the day that happened and just being crushed by what the devastation emotionally, which led, of course, to the big Poppy speech in the 2013 World Series. It sometimes that entire season felt like an out-of-body experience as a Red Sox fan. I love cities that have kind of specific traditions like that. I love the roll call at Yankee Stadium. I love where the bleacher bums do the roll call for the players, and the players have to sort of answer them. I think that's fantastic. I love the tradition of the relatively new tradition of the boats rowing up to the games in San Francisco. Although it's not so new anymore, they've been there for 23 seasons now, and and there's some great traditions. Believe it or not, there's great traditions in Oakland. Where you have if you go back to the 70s, you always have banners that the fans made for every one of the players. Even reserve infielders have banners, and the fans banging the drums, the guys with the banjo going around. Fans in Oakland, they're not plentiful, but the ones who are there, every baseball fan should go to at least one game in Oakland, because you get to see the love and enthusiasm that the fans who do go there have. So I love those traditions that are like individual for the stadiums.
Yeah, and I heard Oakland might be starting a new tradition very soon, because I heard they're going to be doing a reverse boycott later this summer, where they're actually going to get all the fans to go to the game and boycott the game. It's the most insane thing I ever heard. Reverse boycott, where fans are actually going to show up to the stadium and pack the house. We got your ownership. We're packing the stadium, and we're buying beers. We're buying hot dogs. Right there.
I would love to imagine if they organized for 81 games the reverse boycott, and you just see every day Oakland is just filled to the gills. It's like, what are we doing? Maybe we shouldn't move there. But by the way, the game that was played at Fenway Park at the crack of dawn was a bit of a mess. It was played in the rain. There was a delay. The Red Sox were down by 4 before they even came to bat. and the final score was 5-4. The Angels held on even though the Red Sox rallied in the ninth inning. Ohtani had to be lifted because he pitched the first few innings. We're going to talk a little bit about the Angels, and because they wound up salvaging one game. The Red Sox won the first 3 games of that series. So even though the Sox lost that game, they did win the series 3 games out of 4, which you take any time. I do want to bring up, they lost the game started by Ohtani, which you probably earmarked as probably a loss anyway. I do want to talk a little bit about the Angels and their managerial situation because I have some thoughts that may not please Angel fans. The Rays got a rare butt whipping by the Reds. The Reds.
Shocking.
TJ Friedel, is that how you pronounce his name? I thought Friedel was one of the kids in The Sound of Music. Got a game-clearing double and 8-1. Boy, the Rays. You know what? The Rays are bad. They should just they rebuild Tampa.
And was that another game with a rain delay? Just because I'm looking at the box score, both starters only went 3 innings, which is pretty weird. Maybe it's one of those weird situations where you did the reverse starting pitcher thing because the Rays did have Beeks going, but Hunter Green started for the Cincinnati Reds. He only went 3 innings, so I didn't even get a chance to catch this game. So I wonder if it did go into rain delay. But the fact that the Reds of all teams, when you think about what Tampa Bay has done this season, when at one point this year we were looking at the New York Gothams of the world and saying no team has started a season like this since like 1855 or
St.
whatever.
Louis Maroons, the St. Louis Maroons.
The St. Louis Maroons. And then you look up and it's the Cincinnati Reds of all teams to put the best butt whooping on the Tampa Bay Rays this season. Something you would never expect. And I think if you probably bet on this game on FanDuel before the game started, you probably could have got insane odds on the Reds to win this game.
Oh, if only FanDuel was a sponsor of today, we would have just been perfect in there. By the way, let's go. Another Logan Webb signed a contract extension with the San Francisco Giants and rewarded the Giants with a loss. Jorge Soler came up as a pinch hitter in a big 2-run home run. And the Marlins, a team that, remember, I picked the Marlins to be a wild card team, and they're above 500 now. And they've done that despite having some subpar performances by Sandy Alcantara. So I'm just saying there's some good things going on there. Let's by the way, the Cubs-A's game is still going on. Shocker, the Cubs are whipping the A's. But what? You are okay. You are the host of Locked On Diamondbacks.
That's me.
The first place Diamondbacks.
Oh, say it again, Sully. Say it again.
It's still early, but I've submitted my taxes. We've passed tax day, and the D-backs. And here's the deal, and this is one reason I'm bringing this up. They doubled up St. Louis today, helped by a grand slam by
friend of the pod, Pavin Smith.
Pavin Smith hit the granny, and they got that win against a good team. Or a team that we thought was going to be good. In fact, it was a consensus pick to win the National League Central, and they could very well do that. But they doubled them up, and they needed that because the Cardinals rallied late. I think it was a Tommy Edman home run. Someone else hit a home run for St. Louis. But at this point, the Diamondbacks are doing exactly what they should be doing, which is taking advantage of underachievers in the division. Now, L.A., San Diego looks like they're going to lose to Atlanta. LA has just started against the Mets. But as of this recording, the D-backs are the only team in the division above 500.
Yes,
and
sir.
So, you know what? If you want a surprise, it's better to get off to a good start.
Yeah, it's still, I can't get too high on my horses just yet because it's still so early in the season. The sample size is still so small, but Sully, like we've been saying, it's never too early to win games. And the Dodgers fans in my life, the Padres fans in my life, they're like, come talk to me in September. These games don't even matter right now. Guess
they
what?
do.
They do matter. And in September, guess what? The D-backs don't face those teams again until like August. So the fact that they have the early lead now is so much more impressive. And they did it against a Cardinals team who had Jack Flaherty on the mound today, who has been a guy that's been very hurt the last couple of seasons. He was one of the top pitchers back in 2019, and he's been back to looking really good this year. Maybe not that 2019 self, and he was dominant against the D-backs today. Don't look at the box score because the bullpen really let him down when he came out the game. But the D-backs took it to Jack Flaherty. They're going to face Jordan Montgomery tomorrow. But this has just been a kind of weird season for Cardinals fans because, like you said, I think they're now 7-10 on the season or 7-9. They have a below 500 record, and you look at that lineup, like they have a bunch of dudes that are actually performing well, from the Arenados, the Goldschmidts, guys like Jordan Walker had one of the best starts for a rookie ever. And they just haven't scored a lot of runs. Like in terms of batting average, they score very high. In terms of like OPS, they're like top 5 as well, but they just don't put runs across the board. They're not great with runners in scoring position. So you want to see that turn around for them. Their rotation has been kind of weird. I don't think Wainwright's made a start yet this year. Miles Mikolas has been really bad for them this year. So I do think the Cardinals can turn around. I think they have so much talent and just been a really weird start to the season. I think eventually they'll probably hit their stride.
Here's where it's important. Yes, it's early in the season. I just submitted my taxes. But if you're going to be a surprise team, just psychologically, it helps to get out of the gate.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, we're going to May and we're not already done. Oakland started the season losing 13 of their first 16 games. Kansas City has started the season losing 13 of their first 17 games. What are some other crud teams? The Nats have lost 11 of their first 16 games. Colorado has lost 11 of the first 16 games. When you're those teams where nobody's expecting anything from you and you lay an egg right out of the gate, why bother going to a game? I mean, I'm the wrong guy to say because I just like baseball. But if you're a casual fan and you're a Rockies fan, this team's out of it before May.
Yeah.
And so at least for the Diamondbacks and for Pittsburgh, who's playing, scoring big against Colorado tonight, and like the Diamondbacks, who are taking advantage of slow starts from some of the favorites, Pittsburgh is taking advantage of a slow start from St. Louis. Do I think Pittsburgh is necessarily going to be there at the end? Not really. But if you want to at least build on something or improve something, just psychologically, it helps to get out of the gate. So by the time you turn the calendar page to May, you're like, okay, all right, let's see where we are. Let's see where we are.
Because no one was picking for the D-backs to win the World Series or anything like that before the season, but there were a lot of people's picks to maybe be the dark horse or like the team to watch out for.
Not me.
Not you. You're the sleeper team that could come in and steal wild card. And if you start the season, you just flip their record. If they're 7-10, third place in that division, a couple games behind the Dodgers or Padres, you're like, okay, this is just going to be another season where the D-backs are maybe feisty, but they're just clearly a level and tier below those other teams in the division. And now you can say, yeah, they still might not be on the same level those teams, but they at least can compete and fight and battle with them. And they have a real shot at maybe making some noise, being an 80+ win team. And we'll see about the wild card. And I think if you had any expectations for the D-backs, you're validated by this hot start to the season. Hopefully it could continue going.
Well, those are some of the teams that are playing above expectations.
Ooh.
There's a couple of teams that are playing below expectations or below what they can do. That makes me wonder if the person with the car keys are the right person to take the job and to manage the team. And it's not necessarily the teams with the worst record. We'll get to that in segment 2, but my friend Millard Thomas has a little something to tell us about So Rare.
Oh, Sully, I gotta tell our listeners about our new sponsor, So Rare, because it's a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitors and rewards. So Rare MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 to 4 day cycle at the end of game weeks. So rare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include so rare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. So head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon. Start playing today.
By the way, as we're recording this, the Cubs are now beating the A's 6-1.
Oof.
I mean, I'm going up to the Bay Area for a chunk of the summer, and I'm going to go to a few A's games. Folks, go to an A's game. Seriously, go to an A's game. Be amongst those rabid fans who do love and adore their team. And, go there while you still have a chance to go to a game there because, oh, man, it doesn't look good for the A's sticking around there. By the way, the Astros are absolutely manhandling Toronto right now, 9-2. Who's the big slugging star for today in the Astros? It would be drumroll Abreu.
Oh, he hasn't done too much this season. He's actually had a pretty slow start.
Yeah. Now let's talk about some big acquisitions that necessarily that have not reached their expectations. We got word that Giancarlo Stanton is going to miss not just a couple of games. He may miss a giant chunk of the season. He may not be back till after the All-Star break. And this is one of those things, whenever you hear like, well, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks, and 4 to 6 weeks go by, it's kind of like when you take your car to the mechanic and like, hey, is this going to be done anytime soon? Stanton looks like he's going to be gone for a little bit. And not a small chunk of the season. And remember when the Yankees acquired Giancarlo Stanton and people were already printing out World Series tickets for 2018, and
the ground shook that day.
Oh my God! It was this is not fair. Derek Jeter. It was collusion and everything like that.
Collusion. I forgot. They colluded.
He had a because he was coming off his 59 home run season when he won the National League MVP for the Marlins in 2017. He had experienced injuries in several seasons leading up to that. He played 158 games his first year, hit his 38 home runs, was good, but was virtually non-existent in the 2019 season. 2020, of course, was COVID. Give him credit in 2021 that his hitting down the stretch basically got the Yankees in the wild card game, and he was just a few feet away from having a 3 home run game in the wild card game. Last year, even though he made the All-Star team, he slashed 211, 297, 462. Forget a 900 OPS. He didn't have a 760 OPS. He had 31 homers, but he only played 110 games last year, and this year, he's hit some power, but he's going to be gone again. And this is his 6th year with the Yankees. And at least half of those seasons are going to be injury plagued. And the question is, has this been a good acquisition for the Yankees? Has this been a bust?
It's a pretty loaded question, Sully Baseball, because like you just laid out, Giancarlo Stanton, there has been a lot of ups and downs. And when it's down, it's a lot of injuries, specifically like soft tissue injuries, where it's like those naggy hamstring injuries. I feel like if you polled Yankees fans, they probably haven't been too happy with the Giancarlo Stanton experience. But when he's been healthy in the regular season, he's been a home run masher, which you brought him over to do. But the reason I can't say it's been a complete bust, despite him missing a ton of time in a Yankees uniform, is because I look at his postseason stats to the baseball, and despite even the years where he misses a lot of games, He's there for postseason ball. And in 27 postseason games for the Yankees, he's got 11 home runs and a 963 OPS. When the Yankees have made the playoffs and Stanton has been healthy in that lineup, like you mentioned in that Red Sox wildcard game where he was by far and away the best player and carried that team in that game, Stan in a lot of these series, especially against the tougher opponents when he's gone against maybe not the Red Sox in 2019, but the Red Sox in 2021, the Astros, I think in 2019 or 2020, like against the bigger rival opponents when he gets to the postseason, Stan has usually lived up to his money and has performed well and excelled well in those situations. So even though during the regular season there's up and downs, yes, he can still hit home runs, but yes, he will have a hamstring strain and be out for 2 months. But as long as he's there in your lineup for the postseason, you have a chance to win a lot of games with Stan at the plate.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, down the stretch in 2021, which was a very strange year for the Yankees. I mean, just ask Stacey Gotsulias of Locked On Yankees. It was a
AC.
weird year for the team because they had a ton of injuries. They were really they were playing in kind of a lethargic way, and they had so many of those games where the bullpen just wet the bed with massive meltdowns. And yet it was Stanton and his being a one-man wrecking crew against Boston down the stretch that basically slugged the Yankees into the postseason on the final day of the season. And remember, in the COVID year, he wound up hitting 4 home runs in a 5-game series against Tampa Bay. One that Joe Girardi managed the Yankees out. Not Joe Girardi, sorry, Aaron Boone managed. Oh, we'll get to Joe Girardi in a little bit, but they managed the Yankees out of that playoff series. I think that people thought they were getting an all-time great. I think
Yeah.
you made a great point. And if the Yankees had won the World Series one of those years, in one of the years where he was hitting some big home runs in the postseason, he might have become one of those players in Yankee history that are beloved, that may not have put up the best regular season stats, but you know, Jim Leyritz comes to mind. El Duque Hernandez comes to mind. Of someone, when you actually look at their regular season stats, they were not really that remarkable, and yet are never have to pay for a meal in New York ever again because of their gigantic postseason heroics.
hmm
Reggie looked like he was going to be a bust until Game 6 of the World Series in 1977. And so Stanton needs a ring, which he has to be a big contributor for. He can't just be a pinch hitter on this. I mean, he has to contribute that in order to solidify that that spot, because that's what he was acquired for, and
Yeah.
he's done his end of the bargain in some of the postseason series. But so did Raul Ibanez.
Yeah, and guys like Stan, like you said, it's all going to be validated in the postseason. He's someone that's going to have a lot more opportunities because he's under contract until the year 2028, which is maybe not the worst contract in Major League Baseball, because that last year of his deal, it's a team option. And then the last 2 years before that last year, the Marlins are chipping in $10 million a year each of those 2 seasons. So the Yankees do get a little bit shaved off, and Stan this season is actually the 12th highest paid player in baseball, tied with Miguel Cabrera. A little fun fact for the listeners out there. I was just doing that. But I did, if we're going to be talking about worst contracts, I just had to get this guy in there because we brought up the Angels earlier. Do you know, Sully Baseball, who is the 4th highest paid player in baseball this season, sandwiched in between Aaron Judge and Mike Trout?
Well, because you said the Angels,
Uh-huh.
and I have a feeling, and you just said Mike Trout,
Yeah.
I'm kind of bracing myself. Is it Anthony Rendon?
Anthony Rendon is taking home a whopping $38 million this year, and for like the next
Wow.
3 to 4 years. Anthony Rendon, who is fighting fans out here, might be on the worst contract in Major League Baseball. Just had to shoehorn that in real quick.
Wow. Well, look at another person who was acquired and it was looked upon was going to be, oh my God, this is going to be one of the most seismic events in the history of baseball. Was Juan Soto, who is still only 24 years old, which
Super
is
young.
amazing when you think about it. Going into today's game, he slashed a 172 batting average, a 351 on base because he still leads the league in walks, slugging percentage of 379. But his OPS is 731. And in 69 games with the Padres going into today, he has a combined 221 average, an on base of 379. He's going to walk like crazy, and a 388 slugging. He's so far not been good.
No.
He walks a lot, he gets on base. They should be batting leadoff or something, because it's it's way too early to call this Bustville, of course. And if he winds up having a great second half, this will all be forgotten. And if he leads the Padres to a title, this will all be forgotten. But this was supposed to be okay. Now he's no longer in the Nationals, where there's no one else in the lineup. He now has tons of people in the lineup with him. And, Bogarts is holding up his end of the bargain, but this MVP candidate so far is not.
Yeah, he was my preseason pick to win the MVP on our podcast. So for Sully Baseball. So Juan Soto has not lived up to that calling so far. He entered this game leading the league in bases, but in terms of just his OBP, it's the first time in his career he's been below 400. I mean, obviously it's still a super small sample size, but his power hasn't been there this season. His getting on base skills hasn't been there this season. And the average thing, I mean, even if you look at his full season from last year, only batted 242 after being like a 300 plus guy, at least 280 plus the last few seasons before that. So it is kind of weird to see this sudden offensive downtrodden for Juan Soto. And he's someone that I thought maybe in his second year in San Diego would be a little more comfortable. Of course, he was acquired at the deadline last year, but I thought he would have had a little bit more of a bounce back season this year, a little bit more of a resurgence. But maybe just the vibe right now in San Diego, because of course Bogarts is doing well, but Manny Machado, a guy who just got paid that new contract extension after whining throughout the offseason, just got a new deal. He's starting the season really slow as well. So maybe getting Fernando Tatis back could help spark this lineup. Of course, adding another MVP type player, just inserting him in the middle lineup will just take pressure off those guys, because if Tatis is batting like first or second in that lineup, then it's like, oh my God, you got Soto and Machado behind him. Like, they're going to see so many better pitches. Even though they've been seeing great pitches this year, they're going to get even better ones with Tatis in the lineup. And Tatis, I don't know if you've seen in the minor leagues, I think he had at 1.6 home runs and 12 at bats. Like, he is crushing minor league pitching, and he's someone that hasn't like played in the majors in like over like, it's gonna be like close to like 600 days, which is like really insane to think about. So Tatis, I mean, if he could carry what he's been doing in the minors straight to the major leagues and get off to a hot start, like hopefully that should, I mean, personally, I don't hope that happens, Sully, because I like the D-backs being ahead of the Padres in the standings. But if I take my bias out of it, hopefully a Tatis putting him back in the lineup surges this Padres team and sparks a little fire under Soto and Machado.
By the way, Soto and Machado so far today are combined 0 for 4. Now watch, of course, the game is still going on. Watch the game end with back-to-back home runs and Machado walking it off. But by the way, another big contract that I had some misgivings about, much to the anger of the Texas Ranger fans who hate me. And I've had a couple people sort of write me very nasty, tweets and everything like that. Jacob deGrom, I saw he was throwing a no-hitter after 4 in the game today. And then I saw, interesting, that Dunning got the decision because deGrom left the game with wrist soreness while throwing a no-hitter. If there's ever a microcosm for Jacob deGrom's career, it's he left the game with wrist soreness while throwing a no-hitter. When healthy, Jacob deGrom is not one of the best pitchers in baseball. He is the best pitcher in baseball when he's healthy. But we've seen the when he's healthy part being a challenge of the last 2 years, which is why, if he signed with LA, or if he signed with St. Louis, or if he signed or re-signed with the Mets, that would make more sense than asking him to be the guy to carry the Texas Rangers starting staff. So far this year, deGrom has pitched great, and maybe he'll just miss a start or two, and this will be fine. It'll just be a hiccup along the way. That being said, I've heard this song before. I don't want to be right about this. I don't want this to be, and I told you so. I want to see a full season of deGrom. He's one of my favorite players in baseball. And yet, when I see this, I go, "Oh no, here it is. It's not even late April, and here we are."
Yeah, this is not something people want to take a victory lap on because everyone wants to watch one of the most electric pitchers in baseball of the last 20 years pitch because, again, this season, he's led the league in strikeouts per nine in the American League, led the league in FIP. So he's been, like, his ERA hasn't been great, but the underlying numbers tell you he's been really dominant and effective. And for Jacob deGrom, I mean, I don't know how I missed this, but I'm just looking at his age. He's 35 years
Yeah,
old. I
yeah.
thought he was like 32, Sully. I thought he was
No,
like there. So the fact that he's going to be paid until he's age 40, he's already dealt with the injuries the last couple of years, and it just feels like going forward, he's never going to have a healthy season. Maybe can have stretches of healthiness, but it feels like he's always going to have to be someone you manage to get through the regular season. Hopefully, you could build a competent lineup in rotation because I think he's someone that you're like, okay, we could get 120 innings out of Jacob deGrom and just make sure he's healthy for the postseason. That's where he can still earn his money, but you got to make sure you have a great team around him because he can't be that workhorse, can't be that guy that you lean on for 200 plus innings in a season anymore. You probably have to, he could be your number one once you get to the postseason, but I think in the regular season, you probably have to view him as more of a number 3 or like a 6 rotation starter just because you want to manage him through the regular season.
and that's not what they're paid for.
No, not in year one.
And I'm like, and boy, Ranger fans were coming at me like crazy, and yet I kept saying he's 35. When you
My
start
jaw
having
dropped when I looked at that age.
when
I was like,
when you
what?
start having injury issues in your mid to late 30s, they don't suddenly go away. I'm just nervous. I'm nervous about it. I want to be wrong. I want to see a full season of deGrom. Hell, I said, Bruce Bochy is my dad's favorite manager of all time. I would love to see Bruce Bochy back in the World Series with his third team, and that be San Diego, San Francisco, and Texas. If the Rangers make the World Series this year, that would mean that he won pennants in his first pennant was 98 and then have a pennant in 2023. That'd be quite a stretch for Bruce Bochy. That being said, I don't know. I don't want to be wrong. I just don't feel like I am.
Hey, on the bright side, the Rangers, though, they are in first place by a couple of games at the time of us recording. So even though deGrom's going down potentially on the IL, still have hope, Rangers fans. This is exactly what you want. Be a first place team, and you don't even need deGrom there to do it. Just get him healthy for the postseason, and then anything is possible.
Talked about Bruce Bochy as the manager of the Rangers, and I have a lot of faith. Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame manager. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes you see a team that you think maybe they need a managerial change. And it's not necessarily about having the worst record. Mark Kotsay is the manager of the Oakland A's, and they're probably going to lose 200 games out of 162 this year. And that's not mathematically possible. They'll find a way. But it's not Kotsay's fault. Just like this, I don't think, I do think you're going to see Dave Martinez and Bud Black at one point might just wave the white flag and say, hey, let a younger guy come in here and make themselves available in case a job opening happens there. There are a couple of teams we saw last year. The Blue Jays made a managerial change even when their team was in position for a wild card.
Yeah, it was a weird year for managers last year, to be honest.
Year before, the Cardinals went on a wild winning streak down the stretch in September, and they rewarded Mike Schilt by firing him.
Yeah, he was like in the running for manager of the year and everything.
Yeah, and he
might have won it.
He won manager of the year, didn't he? Like 2 years prior, and then 2 years after that, he's updating his LinkedIn page. So sometimes you see managerial changes happening, not necessarily because the team is playing, is terrible, but because you think, hey, we're not out of it, but there's something not clicking here. And there are two managers that just come to mind right now that make me say, I don't see why this person's the manager. And I'll just say the first one is David Ross with the Cubs. Now, the Cardinals are underachieving, to be sure. But I think this is just, I think they will turn things around.
Me too.
We went into this year where the Cardinals were like the only team apparently wanting to contend. Milwaukee is in first place right now. I think St. Louis is going to get their act together. Chicago is playing winning ball right now. They're hovering. They're within a few games of first place. And you think that, oh, wow, Ross is there. You watch him manage a game. You watch him manage a bullpen. You watch how sloppy that is. If I were the Cubs, I would be looking at this team, and Ross has been there since 2020. So this is his fourth season managing the team. This is not a short sample size. And every time, like, I see bullpen decisions bungled, I see the team playing dumb baseball, and I can't help but think that if you're the Cubs and you see an opportunity to steal a division title and you see their manager bungling games, I'm sorry, there are good managerial candidates out there, like Mike Schilt, for God's sakes. I'm not even going to have people do a shot for one of Bruce Bochy's lieutenants right now, but I don't, I do not see what he is bringing to the team as a manager at this point.
Well, yeah, he was probably too green at the time that he got hired, because basically, like, he retired from catching, and then the next day he was hired by the Chicago Cubs to run the franchise. It wasn't quite literally the next day, but he was probably just way too early, didn't go through the necessary steps that most of these managers take. I mean, of course, he was in baseball for a long time. He's been a catcher, so he's been in the pitcher rooms and all that stuff, but yeah, it still feels like you got to get a couple years of experience as an assistant or whatever, and he probably did do some of that stuff, but it felt like David Ross just got elevated probably too quickly, probably before he was ready to become an MLB manager. And in the last couple of years, I wouldn't exactly say he's had the pieces to compete, but one of the reasons the Cubs have blown it up and torn this roster down is because those first couple of years where he was the manager, and it was like, all right, these guys and this team isn't really going anywhere with the Biases and the Chris Bryants and the Anthony Rizzos of the world, so let's just blow it up. And I think that's part of the reason why he's been there for so long, just because you just need someone at the helm to manage a rebuild, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a good manager. Sometimes you put a manager out there because you want to lose as many games as possible and you want to stack those draft picks. So maybe that was part of the reason why David Ross has been there, just because you need a tank commander for your team. But I think if the Cubs were serious about competing and were thinking like, all right, maybe this year we do take a real step toward the playoffs and maybe we can make some noise, then I think they would probably actually switch out David Ross. So I think with the situation that they currently are in, they don't feel that pressure to win games. I think they're okay riding a David Ross until they get serious about trying to win ball games.
But if the division is winnable, if the Cardinals don't get off the mat and you had a chance to sneak in a division, I mean, that was the thing that made a lot of people mad about the 2021 season, because the Cubs were in first place going into, I believe, June. And then they had a couple of bad weeks, and then they traded everything that wasn't nailed down. And, you know, whether or not those trades will yield a new playoff-bound team is yet to be seen. I just look at this team and I go like, I don't see what Ross is offering the world right now. I'm going to go a little bit down the 5 from where I'm sitting right now. Joe Maddon, former Cub manager, was handed the task of going back to the first team he ever managed. He was an interim manager for the Angels a couple of times before winding up being a manager, before being one of Mike Scioscia's lieutenants, and going on to take the Rays to the World Series, take the Cubs to a World Series title. Then he was charged to bringing Mike Trout to the World Series. And before everyone gets too excited about great starts, remember at this point last year, the Angels were off to a fantastic start, and people saying, oh my God, we're going to have an Ohtani Trout World Series. And before you can say, whoops, the Angels wound up firing Joe Maddon and replaced him with Phil Nevin, a guy who was best known for waving home inexplicably. Was it Aaron Judge sent him home in the wild card game in one of the weirdest windmills we've ever seen, of sending home a runner who was obviously going to be thrown out at home. It took the wind out of the Yankees' sails in that. And he was fired from the Yankees for his just blowing the game as a third base coach, and was punished by becoming the manager of the Angels. Here's the deal. I know the Angels won today. They lost 3 out of 4 to Boston. I watched those games. My God, what a fundamental just disaster the Angels looked like. Terrible defense, runners getting picked off, dumb base running plays, throwing to the wrong base. And when something like that happens, and you have the two most exciting players on the planet, and you have their team is playing like the opening act of Major League. I'm sorry. Nevin was an interim manager.
Mhm.
If you could fire a future Hall of Famer like Joe Madden, then you can let go of a guy they hired him by going, you. I mean, because he happened to be there. There's nothing about Phil Nevin that makes me think, oh, they got to keep this guy as the manager. And when you see how the team is playing, it looks like a mess right now. They almost blew a 5-1 second inning lead today.
It might not look pretty by Phil Nevin, but I have a hard time putting too much blame on the managers of the Angels the last few years, because I think at this point it's more of a structural problem from the top with the front office. Because actually, Joe Madden had like a shorter career than I realized with the Angels. He managed the 2020 COVID shortened season, then he had the full season 2021, and then was basically fired a third of the way through 2022. He really didn't have that long of a leash in Anaheim. But when you look at just the situation with the Angels, like, of course, their problems predate Joe Madden. It goes back to the whole Mike Trout era with never being able to get him help. And I think throughout that whole time, you can look at this front office, you can look at this ownership group and realize, like, no manager is ever going to succeed in these situations when you don't put the right pieces around your players and you don't put competent pieces on the field. Because right now, the Angels are starting Jake Lamb at like third base. Like, Jake Lamb is an everyday starter for the Los Angeles Angels, which is crazy. Like I brought up, that Anthony Rendon contract is maybe the worst in Major League Baseball. They gave Pujols that overpaid contract as well. You got the Ohtani deal just hanging over like a cloud on this team. Like, I can only put so much on Phil Nevin and Joe Madden because they're still, I mean, Patrick Sandoval has been good in that rotation, but when's the last legit starter that the Angels have had in that rotation outside of a man that has to both hit and pitch the ball for the Angels? Like, the Angels haven't got a quality number two starter, a quality rotation very long. That pitching has been terrible for so long. We know their offense can do enough when you have Ohtani and the Trouts of the world. Guys like Hunter Renfroe have had good seasons as well. Like, they have enough dudes in that lineup, but until the rotation, the bullpen ever get addressed, you could have competent 1, 2, 3 starters in your rotation outside of Ohtani, then I don't think the Angels situation will ever get fixed. And I think it's more on the front office and the ownership group. And I don't even think it matters who manages. You could have Terry Francona out there. You could have the best managers in baseball. Until the ownership group gets it right with the players on the field, I don't think it'll ever get better.
Well, then they've kicked away the Ohtani Trout era.
Yeah, I think they will.
Because Ohtani is not going to stick around for this.
He's gone, I think. I mean,
He's
just from the vibe of the team, I think Ohtani's leaving.
So why wouldn't you try to pull every string until then?
I mean,
I don't know.
Should you go the opposite way? Should you go blow it up time? Be like, listen, we've had Trout for a decade and it has not mattered at all. Maybe we just trade him and get the Hall of all halls and trade him and Ohtani and reset this bad boy. It's not like having the two greatest players of the last 80 years has done anything for your franchise in terms of on the field success.
Wow. You've been handed these two superstars. And
the two best.
We've expanded the playoffs, and the notion of, do they have an outside chance at the third wild card? All right. Well, look, I've made Rangers and Angels fans hate me with a passion of 1,000 suns. I didn't think anyone could hate me more than Astro fans. And I remind you, Astro fans have said I have an unreasonable hatred for the Astros, even though I rooted for them in the last 2 World Series. Hey, upcoming shows this week include, if you have something you want me to talk about, send me a tweet at Sully Baseball or put a message here on YouTube. And if you're listening every day, if you're listening every single day, let me know on Twitter or on Instagram at Locked On MLB Pods or Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, Sully Baseball on Twitter, on the Locked On MLB YouTube page, and put a hashtag Everyday Sully. Because I had Everyday MLB, but apparently that was already a hashtag. So Everyday Sully, well, so far is not quite as known. So if you listen every single day, let me know. And let me know where you are. I've already found out I have a big fan in Australia and another one in Wales. That's stretching pretty wide right there. But also stretching wide is my co-host right there, Millard Thomas. Tell people where they can listen to your great show.
Stretching wide. I don't know if
I
I
don't
like
know what
that.
I not all my segues are going to work. You're going to have to expect that every
Yeah,
once in a while.
stretching wide. Millard Thomas. Millard Thomas here, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. As you can see, if you're following us on YouTube at Creator Thomas 24 for the personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter and Instagram, and please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
All right. And by the way, the Dodgers are losing right now, which is just going to
go.
chip away at the Diamondbacks' magic number. Talking about the underachievers, the overachievers, and those who are just achieving. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks podcast crossover. He's Millard Thomas. I'm Sully. Let's fist pump for another week.